Do you believe that love can defy an entire empire? In the far reaches of the galaxy, on the lush, vibrant planet of Arlania, lived a princess named Zaria. She was a beacon of hope for her people, her presence radiant with grace and intelligence. Yet, despite her royal lineage, Zaria harbored a secret that could shake the foundations of her world, a forbidden love for a human named Ethan. Ethan was a soldier, part of an expedition from Earth, a planet considered primitive by Arlanian standards. His arrival on Arlania was met with skepticism and fear, but Zaria saw something different in him. She saw a strength, a resilience, and a kindness that transcended the barriers of species and culture. Over time, their bond grew stronger, blossoming into a love that defied the norms of her society. But love between an Arlanian and a human was a sacrilege, a blasphemy against the purity of the Arlanian bloodline. The discovery of their relationship sent shockwaves through the Arlanian elite, culminating in a public trial where Zaria was stripped of her royal titles and exiled to Earth. The trial was brutal, a spectacle of humiliation designed to break her spirit. But Zaria stood tall, her love for Ethan giving her the strength to face her punishment. As she was cast out of her homeland, Zaria vowed to find Ethan, who had been forcibly separated from her, and return to Earth with his memory of their love erased. She knew the journey would be perilous, that Earth was a world torn by conflict and strife, but her resolve was unshakable. She would find Ethan, restore his memories, and together they would forge a new path forward, one that could unite their worlds. Zaria's journey to Earth was fraught with danger. She traveled in a small, cloaked shuttle, its stealth technology barely keeping her hidden from the myriad threats that roamed the galaxy. The journey was long and arduous, but Zaria's determination never wavered. She spent every waking moment planning her next steps, preparing for the challenges that lay ahead. Upon entering Earth's atmosphere, Zaria's shuttle was caught in a storm, the turbulent winds buffeting the small craft as it plummeted towards the planet's surface. With expert skill, Zaria guided the shuttle through the storm, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. As the clouds parted, she caught her first glimpse of Earth, a sprawling, chaotic world of towering cities and vast, untamed wilderness. Zaria landed her shuttle in a remote forest, far from prying eyes. She knew that she would have to move quickly, that Earth's governments would not take kindly to an alien presence, especially one with her abilities. As she stepped out of the shuttle, the crisp air filled her lungs, a stark contrast to the sterile atmosphere of Arlania. Her first priority was to locate Ethan. She had learned of a secret research facility where he had been taken after his return to Earth, a place where his memories had been altered and his body enhanced with cybernetic implants. Zaria's heart ached at the thought of what he had been through, but she knew that she had to be strong, for both of their sakes. As she made her way through the forest, Zaria encountered the harsh realities of Earth's environment. The once pristine wilderness was now scarred by pollution and deforestation, the air thick with the stench of decay. But even in this desolation, Zaria could see the beauty that Earth had to offer, a beauty that was mirrored in the resilience of its people. Zaria knew that she could not do this alone. She would need allies, people who could help her navigate the complexities of Earth's society and find Ethan. But trust was a luxury she could not afford, not in a world where her very existence was a threat. She would have to rely on her wits, her strength, and the love that still burned bright in her heart. With the shadows of night falling around her, Zaria continued her journey, her eyes set on the distant horizon. The road ahead was long and treacherous, but she knew that she would not rest until she had found Ethan and restored what had been taken from them. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, and perhaps, just perhaps, they would find a way to heal the wounds of their worlds and build a future where love could flourish, unbound by the chains of tradition and fear. Zaria's adventure was just beginning, and with each step, she moved closer to the destiny that awaited her, a destiny that would test the limits of her courage, her love, and her determination to defy the odds and change the course of history. Zaria had no time to waste. With each passing moment, the memory of her love, Ethan, grew fainter in his mind. Earth was a dangerous place, especially for someone like her, an exile with no allies and no clear path forward. But Zaria was not one to back down from a challenge. She had faced the wrath of an entire empire. She could face the dangers of Earth. Her first task was to gather information. She needed to know where Ethan was being held and what had been done to him. But Earth was a vast, complex world, and Zaria was a stranger here. She had studied Earth's cultures and languages, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of this chaotic, unpredictable planet. Zaria moved through the shadows, her senses alert to every sound and movement. She had landed in what appeared to be a remote forest, but even here, the signs of human activity were evident. The trees were scared by machinery, and the ground was littered with debris. Zaria's heart ached at the sight. She had heard stories of Earth's beauty, but the reality was far more grim. As she made her way through the forest, Zaria came across a small village. The houses were old and worn, the streets empty and silent. Zaria kept to the shadows, observing the village from a distance. She could see the fear and weariness in the faces of the people who lived there. They were survivors, living on the fringes of a world that had left them behind. Zaria needed to find someone who could help her, someone who knew the secrets of this world and could guide her to Ethan. But trust was a rare commodity on Earth, especially for someone like her. She would have to be careful, choosing her allies wisely. As night fell, Zaria found a small, abandoned building on the edge of the village. It was a decrepit structure, long forgotten by the people who lived nearby. Zaria slipped inside, her heart pounding in her chest. She needed rest, but more than that, she needed a plan. Zaria sat down on the cold, hard floor, her mind racing with thoughts of Ethan. She could feel his presence, even across the vast distance that separated them. Their bond was strong, forged in the fires of love and sacrifice, but Zaria knew that she could not rely on that alone. She needed to find him, to see him, to hold him in her arms once again. As she sat in the darkness, Zaria's mind wandered back to the trial, the moment when everything had changed. She had stood before her father, the Emperor, defiant in the face of his anger. She had known that her love for Ethan was forbidden, that it would cost her everything. But she had never imagined that it would lead her here, to this strange, dangerous world. Zaria's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps outside the building. She tensed, her hand moving instinctively to the weapon at her side. She had to be ready for anything. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. Zaria's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the figure. It was a man, tall and strong, with a face that was both familiar and unfamiliar. His eyes were cold and hard, but there was something in them that reminded Zaria of Ethan. Could it be him? Could it be the man she had come so far to find? But as the man stepped closer, Zaria realized her mistake. This was not Ethan. This was a soldier sent to capture her, to take her back to the Empire. Zaria's heart raced as she realized the danger she was in. She had to act fast. Without a moment's hesitation, Zaria sprang into action. She moved with the grace and speed of a trained warrior, her body a blur of motion as she took down the soldier with a swift, precise strike. The man fell to the ground, unconscious, his weapon clattering to the floor. Zaria stood over the fallen soldier, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She had to get out of here, to find Ethan before it was too late. But as she turned to leave, she heard a sound that made her blood run cold, a voice, speaking in a language she had never heard before. Zaria spun around, her eyes wide with fear. She was not alone. There were more of them, soldiers sent to capture her, to take her back to the Empire. She had to move fast, to escape before they could find her. With a final glance at the fallen soldier, Zaria slipped out of the building and into the night. She moved through the shadows, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to find Ethan, to save him from the fate that awaited him. But she knew that she was running out of time. The Empire was closing in, and she was running out of places to hide. Zaria moved swiftly through the dense forest, her heart pounding as she tried to shake the sense of urgency that clung to her every step. She had narrowly escaped the soldiers, but she knew they would not be far behind. The Empire's reach was long, even on a planet as chaotic as Earth. But Zaria was not ready to give up. She had come too far, and Ethan was too important. As she navigated the unfamiliar terrain, Zaria's thoughts were consumed by the mystery of the man she had encountered. He bore a resemblance to Ethan, yet his eyes were devoid of the warmth and kindness she had fallen in love with. Was this some cruel trick by the Empire, or was it possible that Ethan had been transformed into something unrecognizable? Zaria pushed these thoughts aside as she focused on her immediate goal, finding the Resistance. She had heard whispers of a group of rebels who operated in the shadows, opposing both the Empire and Earth's corrupt governments. If anyone could help her locate Ethan, it was them. Her journey led her to the outskirts of a sprawling, decaying city. The air was thick with pollution, and the streets were lined with crumbling buildings and the remnants of a once thriving society. Zaria kept to the shadows, avoiding the patrolling drones and the ever-watchful eyes of the authorities. After hours of searching, Zaria found herself in a hidden alleyway, where she spotted a symbol etched into the wall, a stylized phoenix rising from the ashes. It was the mark of the Resistance. Taking a deep breath, Zaria approached the symbol and pressed her hand against it. A moment later, the wall shifted, revealing a hidden door. Zaria stepped inside, her heart racing with anticipation and fear. The door led to a dimly lit corridor, where Zaria was met by a group of Resistance fighters. They were a diverse group, made up of humans and other alien species who had found refuge on Earth. Their leader, a stern-looking woman with striking silver hair, stepped forward. "You must be the one we've heard about," the woman said, her voice steady and commanding. "The princess from Arlania. We've been expecting you." Zaria nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I need your help. I'm looking for someone. Ethan. He was taken by the Empire, and I fear they've done something to him. I have to find him before it's too late." The woman regarded Zaria with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. "You're brave, coming here alone. But bravery alone won't be enough. The Empire has its claws deep into this world, and finding one man won't be easy." Zaria's determination flared. "I don't care how dangerous it is. I'll do whatever it takes." The woman studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. We've heard rumors of a facility where the Empire conducts its experiments. If your Ethan is there, it's heavily guarded, and getting in won't be easy. But we can help you, if you're willing to help us in return." Zaria didn't hesitate. "What do you need?" The woman gestured for Zaria to follow her deeper into the Resistance's base. As they walked, she explained the situation. The Resistance had been fighting against the Empire's influence on Earth for years, but they were losing ground. The Empire had access to advanced technology and weapons, and the Resistance was struggling to keep up. They needed someone with Zaria's abilities, her telekinesis, her combat skills, and her knowledge of the Empire's tactics. "We're planning a major operation," the woman said as they entered a large room filled with maps, holographic displays, and Resistance fighters preparing for battle. "We need to take out one of the Empire's key installations, a communication hub that coordinates their activities on Earth. If we can disable it, we'll have a chance to strike at their other facilities, including the one where Ethan is being held." Zaria's mind raced as she took in the details of the plan. It was risky, but it was also her best chance of finding Ethan. She turned to the woman, her resolve clear in her eyes. "I'm in. Tell me what I need to do." The woman smiled, a rare expression of warmth in the cold, harsh world they inhabited. "Good. We'll brief you on the details. But know this, once we start, there's no turning back. The Empire won't rest until we're all dead." Zaria nodded. "I understand. Let's do this." Over the next few days, Zaria worked closely with the Resistance, learning their strategies and preparing for the mission. She trained with the fighters, honing her skills and familiarizing herself with Earth's technology. The resistance was resourceful, using whatever they could scavenge or steal to fight back against the Empire's overwhelming power. As the day of the operation approached, Zaria felt a mix of fear and anticipation. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. The moment when she would finally be able to fight back against the Empire and find Ethan. But as she stood on the brink of battle, she couldn't shake the nagging doubt in the back of her mind. What if Ethan was truly lost to her? What if the Empire had succeeded in turning him into something unrecognizable? Zaria pushed these thoughts aside. She couldn't afford to dwell on them. She had to stay focused, to keep her mind sharp and her resolve strong. For Ethan, for the Resistance, and for the future of both their worlds. The night of the operation had arrived. The Resistance fighters were gathered in the underground command center, their faces grim and determined. Zaria stood among them, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and resolve. She was ready. They were all ready. The plan was simple, yet incredibly dangerous. Zaria and a small team would infiltrate the Empire's communication hub, disabling its defenses and allowing the rest of the Resistance to launch a full-scale assault. It was a high-risk, high-reward mission. If they succeeded, it would be a major blow to the Empire's control over Earth. If they failed, it could mean the end of the Resistance. Zaria's team consisted of 4 other fighters. Jax, a burly human with a knack for explosives. Lyra, a sharpshooter with a mysterious past. Thrax, a hulking alien with immense strength. And Zara, a tech specialist who could hack into almost any system. Together, they formed a formidable unit, each bringing unique skills to the mission. The team moved through the underground tunnels that led to the outskirts of the city, where the communication hub was located. The tunnels were dark and damp, the air thick with the smell of earth and decay. Zaria kept her senses alert, her mind focused on the task at hand. There was no room for error. As they reached the end of the tunnel, Jax planted a small explosive on the wall. With a muffled boom, the wall crumbled, revealing a narrow passageway that led to the surface. One by one, the team climbed out, emerging into the shadows of the city. The communication hub was a towering structure of metal and glass, its sleek design a stark contrast to the crumbling buildings that surrounded it. The hub was heavily guarded, with patrols of Empire soldiers and drones monitoring the perimeter. But Zaria and her team were prepared. They had studied the patrol patterns, the security systems, and the layout of the building. They knew exactly where to strike. Lyra took the lead, her sharp eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. She signaled for the team to move forward, and they crept through the shadows, avoiding the patrols and making their way to the base of the hub. Zaria's heart raced as they reached the entrance. This was it, the moment of truth. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. Zara stepped forward, her fingers flying across the control panel as she hacked into the building's security system. Within moments, the door slid open with a soft hiss, and the team slipped inside. The interior of the hub was cold and sterile, the walls lined with monitors and control panels. The air hummed with the sound of machinery, and the faint glow of screens illuminated the dark corridors. Zaria led the way, her mind focused on the objective. They had to reach the central control room and disable the hub's communication systems. The team moved quickly and quietly, taking out any guards they encountered with swift, silent efficiency. Zaria's telekinesis proved invaluable, allowing her to disable security cameras and sensors without triggering any alarms. They were making good progress, but Zaria knew they couldn't afford to let their guard down. As they approached the control room, the tension in the air was palpable. This was the most dangerous part of the mission, the point of no return. If they were discovered now, there would be no escape. Zaria exchanged a glance with her teammates, each of them steeling themselves for what lay ahead. Zara worked her magic on the control room door, bypassing the security codes and unlocking the heavy metal barrier. The door slid open, revealing a vast room filled with consoles and holographic displays. In the center of the room stood the communication array, a towering structure of blinking lights and cables. Jax immediately went to work, setting up explosives around the room to ensure that the hub would be completely destroyed. Lyra and Thrax took up defensive positions, their weapons at the ready. Zaria began working on the control panels, her fingers dancing across the keys as she disabled the hub's defenses. Zaria felt a surge of adrenaline as she approached the communication array. This was it, the culmination of all their efforts. She placed her hand on the array, feeling the hum of energy beneath her fingers. With a deep breath, she reached out with her mind, using her telekinesis to overload the system. The array sparked and sputtered, the lights flickering as the system began to fail. Zaria worked furiously, shutting down the remaining systems and initiating the self-destruct sequence. The room was filled with the sound of alarms, the red emergency lights casting an eerie glow over the scene. "Time to go," Jax shouted, his voice barely audible over the blaring alarms. The team moved as one, racing out of the control room and back the way they had come. But as they reached the exit, they were met with a wall of Empire soldiers, their weapons raised and ready. Zaria's heart skipped a beat as she realized they had been trapped. The Empire had anticipated their move, and now they were surrounded. But Zaria was not ready to give up. She had come too far, fought too hard, to be stopped now. With a fierce cry, Zaria unleashed a wave of telekinetic energy, sending the soldiers flying back. The team seized the opportunity, breaking through the enemy lines and making a run for the exit. They had to move fast. The hub was seconds away from destruction, and they needed to be far away when it blew. They raced through the corridors, the walls shaking as the building began to collapse around them. The team burst through the entrance, sprinting across the open ground as the communication hub erupted in a massive explosion. The shockwave sent them tumbling to the ground, but they quickly scrambled to their feet, not daring to look back at the destruction they had wrought. Zaria's breath came in ragged gasps as she glanced at her teammates, all of them battered but alive. They had done it. The communication hub was destroyed, and the Empire's control over Earth had been dealt a serious blow. But as they made their way back to the Resistance base, Zaria knew that their fight was far from over. She still had to find Ethan, and she knew that the Empire would stop at nothing to prevent that. But Zaria was ready for whatever came next. She had the Resistance on her side, and she was more determined than ever to find Ethan and bring an end to the Empire's tyranny. Back at the Resistance base, the atmosphere was one of cautious optimism. The successful destruction of the Empire's communication hub had given them a much-needed victory, but everyone knew that the Empire would retaliate with full force. Zaria, however, had no time to dwell on the implications. She was focused on the next step, finding Ethan. The Resistance leader, the silver-haired woman named Kaya, called Zaria to a private meeting. In the dimly lit room, Kaya leaned over a table covered in maps and intelligence reports. Her expression was serious, her eyes sharp with calculation. "You did well, Zaria," Kaya said, her tone measured. "The hub's destruction has thrown the Empire into disarray, but they'll recover quickly. We need to capitalize on this moment and strike at their other facilities. But I know you're more concerned about finding Ethan." Zaria nodded, her heart heavy with worry. "Yes. Do you have any leads on where he might be?" Kaya gestured to a map of Earth, where several locations were marked with red circles. "We've intercepted some communications. There's a facility hidden deep in the mountains, far from any major cities. It's heavily guarded and almost impossible to reach without drawing attention. If Ethan is anywhere, it's there." Zaria studied the map, her mind racing with possibilities. The facility was isolated, surrounded by treacherous terrain, and monitored by the Empire's most advanced security systems. Getting in would be a challenge, but Zaria was determined to succeed. Kaya continued, "We'll need more than just brute force to get in. There's someone who might be able to help us, a former Empire scientist who defected to the Resistance. He knows their technology inside and out, and he might have the key to getting into that facility. But there's a catch. He's in hiding, and he doesn't trust anyone. Where is he? Zaria asked, her voice steady. He's in the ruins of old New York, deep underground, Kaya replied. It's a dangerous place, full of scavengers and mercenaries. But if you can find him and convince him to help, it could be our best shot at getting into that facility and finding Ethan. Zaria felt a pang of uncertainty. Old New York was notorious for being a lawless wasteland, a place where even the bravest dared not venture. But she had no choice. Ethan was out there, and she couldn't abandon him. I'll go, Zaria said firmly. Tell me everything I need to know. Kaya nodded, handing Zaria a small device. This is a communicator. It's encoded with our frequencies, so you can stay in touch with us. Be careful, Zaria. Old New York is no place for someone with a price on their head. Zaria took the device and secured it in her pocket. I'll be careful, but I won't let anything stop me from finding Ethan. With that, Zaria prepared for the journey to Old New York. She gathered her gear, checked her weapons, and said her goodbyes to the resistance fighters who had become her allies. They wished her luck, knowing that her mission was fraught with danger. The journey to Old New York was long and perilous. Zaria traveled by night, avoiding the Empire's patrols and the roving bands of mercenaries that prowled the wastelands. The once great city had been reduced to ruins, its towering skyscrapers now crumbling husks, and its streets choked with debris and overgrown with weeds. Zaria moved cautiously through the desolate landscape, her senses on high alert. She knew that danger could come from any direction, and she couldn't afford to let her guard down. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the only sounds were the distant echoes of crumbling buildings and the occasional cry of a scavenger. After hours of searching, Zaria found the entrance to the underground network where the scientist was rumored to be hiding. The entrance was hidden beneath the remains of an old subway station, accessible only through a narrow, debris-filled tunnel. Zaria squeezed through the tunnel, her heart pounding as she descended into the darkness. The air was stale and damp, and the walls were lined with old, rusted pipes. She activated a small flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness as she navigated the labyrinthine corridors. The underground network was a maze of tunnels and chambers, some flooded with water, others blocked by collapsed ceilings. Zaria moved carefully, her footsteps echoing in the empty passages. She could feel the weight of the earth pressing down on her, the oppressive silence broken only by the occasional drip of water. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Zaria reached a large open chamber. The walls were lined with makeshift equipment, and the air was filled with the hum of machinery. In the center of the chamber stood a man, his back turned to her as he worked on a complex device. Zaria approached cautiously, her hand on her weapon. "Are you the scientist?" she asked, her voice echoing in the chamber. The man turned slowly, his face obscured by a hood. When he spoke, his voice was low and gruff. "I might be. Depends on who's asking." "I'm with the Resistance," Zaria replied, her tone firm. "We need your help to infiltrate an Empire facility." The man studied her for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. "And why should I help you?" "The Empire is everywhere. Helping you could get me killed." Zaria took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. "Because you know what they're doing is wrong. Because you left them for a reason. And because there are people, good people, who need your help. I need your help." The man sighed, lowering his hood to reveal a weathered face lined with years of hardship. "You're right. I didn't leave the Empire to hide down here forever. If I can help, I will. But it won't be easy. That facility is one of their most secure. We'll need a plan, and we'll need to move fast." Zaria nodded, relief flooding through her. "Thank you. We don't have much time. Let's get started." The scientist led Zaria to a table covered in blueprints and schematics. Together, they began to formulate a plan to infiltrate the Empire's facility, knowing that the fate of their mission and Ethan's life hung in the balance. Days of planning and preparation had led to this moment. Zaria, the scientist, and a small team of resistance fighters stood at the edge of the forest that bordered the Empire's hidden facility. The facility was nestled deep in the mountains, surrounded by steep cliffs and dense woods, making it nearly impenetrable. Zaria's heart raced as she looked at the imposing structure before her. This was it, the final step in her journey to find Ethan. The facility was heavily guarded, with patrols of soldiers and drones constantly circling the perimeter. But they had a plan, and Zaria was determined to see it through. The scientist, whose name was Dr. Elias, had provided the team with a detailed layout of the facility, including the location of the security systems and the central control room. Their plan was to disable the defenses, allowing Zaria to infiltrate the facility and find Ethan. The team moved silently through the forest, using the cover of darkness to approach the facility undetected. Dr. Elias led the way, his knowledge of the Empire's technology proving invaluable as they bypassed security sensors and disarmed traps. As they reached the outer wall of the facility, Zaria felt a surge of anticipation. They were so close now, so close to finding Ethan. She could almost feel his presence, a distant but persistent pull that guided her forward. Dr. Elias hacked into the facility's security system, disabling the cameras and opening a small access hatch. One by one, the team slipped inside, their movements quick and precise. They were in. The interior of the facility was cold and sterile, the walls lined with metal and the air filled with the hum of machinery. Zaria led the way, her senses alert as they navigated the labyrinthine corridors. They had to move fast. Once the Empire realized they were inside, they would be swarmed with soldiers. The team split up, with Dr. Elias and the resistance fighters heading to the control room to disable the facility's main defenses. Zaria continued alone, her heart pounding as she made her way to the lower levels, where she knew Ethan was being held. The deeper she went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The corridors were lined with cells, each one filled with prisoners, humans and aliens alike, all victims of the Empire's cruelty. Zaria felt a surge of anger as she passed by, vowing to free them once she had found Ethan. Finally, Zaria reached the chamber where Ethan was being held. The door was reinforced with layers of security, but Zaria was prepared. She used her telekinesis to overload the locking mechanism, forcing the door open with a loud hiss. Inside, the chamber was dimly lit, the air thick with the stench of chemicals and antiseptic. Zaria's heart ached as she saw Ethan lying on a metal table, his body strapped down and his eyes closed. He looked pale and gaunt, a shadow of the man she had once known. Zaria rushed to his side, her hands trembling as she gently touched his face. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm here. It's me, Zaria." Ethan's eyes fluttered open, but they were unfocused, glazed over with the effects of the Empire's experiments. Zaria's heart sank as she realized the extent of what they had done to him. They had wiped his memories, turned him into a weapon, a tool for their own purposes. But Zaria refused to give up. She had come too far, fought too hard. To lose him now, she would do whatever it took to bring him back, to restore the man she loved. As Zaria began to unfasten the straps that bound Ethan, the door to the chamber suddenly burst open. A group of Empire soldiers stormed in, their weapons trained on Zaria. "Step away from him," one of the soldiers barked, his voice cold and commanding. Zaria's heart pounded in her chest as she realized she was surrounded. But she was not afraid. She had faced the Empire before, and she would face them again. For Ethan, for the Resistance, and for the future they had fought so hard to protect. With a fierce cry, Zaria unleashed a wave of telekinetic energy, sending the soldiers flying back. She moved with the speed and precision of a warrior, taking down each soldier with swift, deadly force. But the soldiers kept coming, more and more of them pouring into the chamber. Zaria knew she couldn't fight them all, but she had to protect Ethan. She positioned herself between him and the soldiers, her telekinetic shield deflecting their attacks. Just as Zaria began to falter, a new figure entered the chamber. It was a woman, tall and imposing, with a cold, calculating expression. Zaria recognized her immediately. Commander Valis, the Empire's most ruthless enforcer. "So this is the infamous Princess Zaria," Valis sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "I must say, you've caused quite a bit of trouble. But it ends here." Zaria glared at Valis, her eyes blazing with defiance. "You're not taking him. I won't let you." Valis smirked, raising her weapon. "We'll see about that." The battle that followed was fierce and brutal. Zaria fought with everything she had, using her telekinesis to its full extent. But Valis was a skilled fighter, her movements precise and calculated. She pressed her advantage, driving Zaria back with each blow. Zaria's strength began to wane, her vision blurring as exhaustion set in. But she refused to give up. She had to protect Ethan, no matter the cost. Just as Valis moved in for the final strike, the room was suddenly flooded with light. The sound of gunfire filled the air as resistance fighters poured into the chamber, led by Dr. Elias. "Zaria, get Ethan out of here." Dr. Elias shouted as he and the fighters engaged the soldiers. Zaria didn't need to be told twice. She rushed to Ethan's side, unstrapping him and lifting him into her arms. With a final glance at the chaos around her, she sprinted out of the chamber, her heart pounding with fear and determination. The facility was in chaos, alarms blaring as soldiers and resistance fighters clashed in the corridors. Zaria moved quickly, dodging bullets and avoiding enemy patrols as she made her way to the extraction point. As she reached the surface, Zaria saw the Resistance's shuttle waiting for her. She sprinted towards it, her heart pounding as she cradled Ethan in her arms. The ramp lowered, and she hurried inside, the door closing behind her as the shuttle lifted off. Zaria collapsed into a seat, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she held Ethan close. They had done it. They had escaped. But as she looked down at Ethan's pale, unresponsive face, she knew that their fight was far from over. The shuttle flew through the night sky, the distant lights of the city flickering below. Zaria sat in silence, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. Ethan was safe, but the man she loved was still lost to her. The Empire's experiments had taken a toll on him, erasing his memories and turning him into something unrecognizable. As the shuttle approached the Resistance's base, Zaria felt a heavy weight settle in her chest. She had fought so hard, sacrificed so much, and yet the future was still uncertain. But she refused to give up. She had made a promise to herself, to Ethan, and to the Resistance. She would find a way to bring Ethan back, no matter what it took. The shuttle touched down, and Zaria was met by Kaya and the rest of the Resistance fighters. They looked at her with a mixture of relief and concern, their eyes lingering on the unconscious form of Ethan. "Is he?" Kaya began, her voice soft with worry. "He's alive," Zaria replied, her voice steady. "But they did something to him. They erased his memories, turned him into a weapon. I don't know how to fix it, but I have to try." Kaya nodded, placing a hand on Zaria's shoulder. "We'll do everything we can to help. But for now, you both need rest. You've been through enough." Zaria nodded, her exhaustion finally catching up to her. She followed Kaya as they carried Ethan to the medical bay, where he was placed in a recovery chamber. Zaria watched as the doctors worked to stabilize him, their expressions grim as they assessed the damage. Zaria sat by Ethan's side, her hand gently resting on his. She watched the rise and fall of his chest, her heart aching with a mix of love and sorrow. She had found him, but the road to recovery would be long and difficult, and there was no guarantee that Ethan would ever be the same. Days turned into weeks as Zaria stayed by Ethan's side, refusing to leave him for even a moment. The Resistance continued their fight against the Empire, but Zaria's world had shrunk to the confines of the medical bay, her every thought consumed by the man she loved. One night, as Zaria sat in the dimly lit room, she felt a faint movement in Ethan's hand. Her heart leaped as she looked down, seeing his fingers twitch, His eyes slowly fluttered open, and for a brief moment, Zaria saw a flicker of recognition in his gaze. "Ethan," Zaria whispered, her voice trembling with hope. Ethan's eyes met hers, and though they were still clouded with confusion, there was a spark of something familiar, something that gave Zaria hope. "Zaria," Ethan murmured, his voice weak. I remember." Tears filled Zaria's eyes as she leaned closer, her heart swelling with joy. "You remember?" Ethan nodded slowly, his hand tightening around hers. "Not everything, but I remember you. I remember us." Zaria's tears spilled over as she smiled, her heart bursting with love. "That's all that matters, Ethan. We'll get through this together. I promise." Ethan smiled weakly, his eyes filled with a mix of relief and determination. "Together," he echoed, his voice growing stronger. As the days passed, Ethan's memories slowly began to return, piece by piece. The road to recovery was long, and there were moments of doubt and frustration, but Zaria never left his side. She was his anchor, his guiding light in the darkness. The resistance continued their fight, and with Ethan's knowledge of the Empire's operations, they were able to strike significant blows against their enemies. The tide of the war began to turn, and hope began to spread among the people of Earth. But Zaria and Ethan's fight was not just for the resistance, it was for each other, for the future they had dreamed of but never thought possible. They had faced unimaginable challenges, but their love had endured, stronger and more resilient than ever. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, Zaria stood with Ethan on the balcony of the Resistance's base, watching the sun rise over the mountains. It was a new day, a new beginning for both of them. "We've come a long way," Ethan said softly, his arm wrapped around Zaria's shoulders. "We have," Zaria replied, leaning into him. "But there's still so much to do. The Empire is still out there, and our fight isn't over." Ethan nodded, his gaze focused on the distant horizon. "We'll face it together. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Zaria smiled, her heart filled with a sense of peace and hope. They had found each other again, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Zaria and Ethan stood together, their hands intertwined, ready to face whatever the future held. They had fought for their love, for their freedom, and for the chance to build a better world. And they would continue to fight, together, for as long as it took. The dawn of a new era had begun, and Zaria and Ethan were ready to meet it head-on, their love a beacon of hope in a world that was finally beginning to heal.